The wine was cheap. The slap was calculated. And Ada-chan, who'd never broken a rule in her life, was about to become the most valuable piece on a chessboard she didn't know she was standing on. It happened on a Tuesday night when the Diamond Pearl Casino hummed with the desperate energy of people convinced their luck was about to change. Ada had been carrying a tray of drinks, 3 whiskeys, 2 martinis, and 1 glass of red wine that cost more than her weekly wages. When her heel caught on the carpet, the wine arced through the air in slow motion, a crimson parabola that ended on the white silk dress of the most beautiful woman Ada had ever seen. For one frozen heartbeat, the entire VIP section went silent. Then the woman stood, wine dripping from designer fabric, and her hand connected with Ada's face with a crack that echoed off the high ceilings. "Clumsy bitch," the woman hissed in accented English, her perfect face twisted with rage. Ada stumbled backward, ears ringing, cheek on fire. Through watering eyes, she saw the woman's companion rise from his seat. Kōng Noir. Everyone knew his name. Everyone knew what he was. The kind of man who made casino managers nervous and police officers look the other way. Kong looked at Ada, really looked at her, and something flickered in his dark eyes. Not sympathy, something colder, more calculating. Then he turned to the woman and spoke 2 quiet words in Mandarin. The woman's face went white. She grabbed her purse and left without another word, heels clicking against marble like gunshots. Kong gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Sit," he said to Ada. Not a request. Ada should have run, should have apologized and disappeared into the service corridors and never looked back. Instead, she sat, because sometimes the worst decisions look like mercy. And sometimes a single slap sets off a chain of events that will topple criminal empires, destroy innocent lives, and prove that the most dangerous players are the ones nobody sees coming. This is the story of how a minimum wage waitress became the center of an international war. It begins with spilled wine and a calculated slap. It ends with a choice that will change everything. But first, you need to understand, nothing that happened that night was an accident. The sound cut through the restaurant like a gunshot. Smack. Every conversation inside Kōng Noir died at once. Crystal glasses hovered midair. Forks froze inches above porcelain plates. Even the soft jazz drifting from the corner speakers seemed to choke on its own melody. Ada Williams didn't fall. She didn't stumble backward or cry out the way everyone expected her to. She simply stood there, her head turned slightly to the side, her cheek burning as heat rushed beneath her skin. The sting came second. The humiliation came first. Across from her stood Yura Kang, perfectly sculpted, perfectly dressed, and perfectly furious. Her manicured hand still hung in the air, trembling, not from guilt, but from disbelief that she had actually struck someone. "You stupid girl," Yura hissed, her Korean accent sharpening the insult. "Do you know how much this dress costs?" 2 drops of red wine slid slowly down the white silk clinging to Yura's waist. 2 drops. Ada stared at them, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. She had served hundreds of difficult guests in this restaurant. Politicians, celebrities, men whose money smelled older than the country itself, but none of them had ever laid a hand on her. Not like this. Not in front of everyone. The room waited. This was the moment when women like Ada were expected to break, to apologize through tears, to bow their heads, to accept the blame simply for existing in the wrong space. Ada's fingers trembled at her sides, not from fear, but from restraint. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her hand to the small wooden cross resting against her chest. It was worn smooth from years of being touched, prayed over, clutched during nights when hunger and grief shared the same bed. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. "Dignity is the one thing they can't take unless you hand it to them." Ada closed her eyes. The restaurant held its breath. She prayed, not for the woman who had slapped her, but for herself. "Lord, don't let bitterness live in me. Don't let anger make me small." When she opened her eyes, There were no tears in them. Only calm. Are you done? Ada asked quietly. A ripple of shock moved through the room. Yura blinked. What did you say? I asked if you were done, Ada repeated, her voice steady despite the storm raging in her chest. Because if you are, I need to return to my section. A gasp escaped someone near the bar. No one spoke to Yura Kang like that. Especially not a black waitress in a borrowed uniform and worn shoes. Yura's lips parted in disbelief. Then her face twisted with rage. You insolent. Enough. The word didn't come from Yura. It came from behind them. Low. Calm. Deadly. Ada felt it before she saw him. The sudden shift in the air. The way power entered a space without asking permission. Conversations didn't just stop. They bowed. She turned slowly. Min-Jae had risen from the VIP booth. Tall. Immaculate. Untouchable. The man newspapers called a billionaire philanthropist and whispered about as something far darker stood with his jacket unbuttoned, one hand resting casually in his pocket. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, cold, assessing, were locked on the scene in front of him. On her, Yura's anger melted instantly into something softer. Hopeful. Desperate. Kōng, she said, her voice trembling now. She spilled wine on me. She disrespected me. Kōng didn't look at her. Not once. He stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and Ada, then turned slightly, placing his body between the waitress and his ex-wife. The message was unmistakable. You don't strike my staff, Kōng said quietly. Yura laughed nervously. Your staff? Since when do you care about? I don't care about the dress, Kōng interrupted. And I don't care about your anger. The room felt colder. You embarrassed yourself tonight, he continued. And you embarrassed me. Yura's smile collapsed. You can't be serious. I am, Kōng replied. You're done here. Her eyes widened. You don't mean. Tonight, he said. And permanently. Two security men appeared instantly, as if summoned by his will alone. Yura's face flushed red. You would choose her over me? Kōng finally looked at her then, and whatever she saw in his eyes silenced her. I didn't choose her, he said. You chose this. Security took her by the arms. As she was dragged toward the exit, Yura's gaze locked onto Ada, burning, venomous, promising this wasn't over. The doors closed behind her. Silence followed. Kōng turned back to Ada. For the first time since the slap, her knees threatened to give way. You're hurt, he said. It's nothing, Ada replied automatically. He studied her face, the faint redness on her cheek, the way she stood straight despite it all. What's your name, he asked. Ada, she said. Ada Williams. He nodded once, as if filing the information somewhere important. Finish your shift, Kōng said. Then come see me. Her breath caught. Sir. My office, he clarified. After closing, he turned and walked away, the room parting for him like water. Ada stood there, heart racing. She had come to work tonight worried about rent, about groceries, about whether her little brother's school fees would bounce again. She hadn't expected to be slapped. She hadn't expected to be seen. And she had no idea that with one quiet prayer and one unanswered slap, her life had just stepped onto a battlefield she didn't yet understand. The war hadn't started with a gun. It started with a hand raised in anger. And a woman who refused to fall. Ada finished her shift on instinct. Her body moved while her mind lagged behind, replaying the slap, the silence, the way the entire room had bent when Min-Jae stood. Plates were cleared. Orders were taken. Smiles were forced. But beneath it all, her heart thudded like a warning drum. Everywhere she went, eyes followed. Some held pity, some curiosity, some fear. No one spoke about Yura Kang out loud, but her absence screamed through the room. Guests whispered behind napkins. Phones buzzed discreetly beneath tables. By the time dessert was served, the story had already escaped the walls of Kōng Noir. The ex-wife slapped a waitress. The boss chose the waitress. Yura Kang was thrown out. Ada kept her head down. She had learned early that attention, good or bad, was dangerous. When the final guest left and the doors were locked, the restaurant exhaled. Chairs were stacked. Lights dimmed. The staff gathered their things in hushed silence, avoiding Ada's eyes as if she were suddenly radioactive. "Williams," the manager said, not unkindly. "Mr. Kong is waiting." Her stomach tightened. She nodded once and followed the private hallway past the wine cellar, past doors she had never been allowed to approach. Each step felt heavier than the last. Not fear, anticipation. Kong's office door stood open. Warm firelight spilled out, chasing away the cold marble chill of the corridor. Ada paused at the threshold, smoothing her uniform, pressing her fingers briefly to the wooden cross at her chest. "Just breathe. Come in," Kong said, without looking up. She stepped inside. The office was nothing like she expected. No gold. No excess. Just dark wood, clean lines, shelves of books instead of trophies. A world built on control, not display. Kong stood by the windowless wall, jacket removed now, sleeves rolled back. Up close, he was even more imposing, not because of size, but because of stillness. Men like him didn't rush. They decided. "You can sit," he said. Ada remained standing. He noticed. A flicker of something, approval, maybe, passed through his eyes. "Why didn't you cry?" he asked. The question landed without warning. Ada swallowed. Because crying wouldn't change anything. Most people lied to powerful men. Ada didn't have the energy for that. "And why didn't you apologize?" he continued. "Because I didn't do anything wrong." Silence stretched between them, thick but not hostile. "You prayed," Kong said finally. It wasn't a question. Ada's fingers brushed the cross unconsciously. "Yes." "For forgiveness?" he asked. "For strength," she replied. "I didn't want anger to decide who I became in that moment." Kong studied her like a man reading a language he had forgotten. "Most people beg when they're humiliated," he said. "You didn't." "My grandmother used to say," Ada answered softly, "that dignity is louder than shouting, and harder to steal." Something shifted. Kong turned away, pouring himself a drink he didn't touch. "You know who she is," he said. "Yes, sir." "And you still spoke to her that way?" "Yes, sir." "You're either very brave," he said, "or very foolish." Ada met his gaze. "I'm very tired of being invisible." The words surprised them both. Kong set the glass down slowly. "You work hard," he said. "Your file says you've never missed a shift." Ada blinked. "You read my file?" "I read everything," Kong replied. "You support your brother. You send money home. You don't complain." He walked closer. "People like you keep this city standing," he said quietly. "And people like her think they own it." He reached into his desk drawer and slid an envelope across the table. Ada hesitated, then opened it. Her breath caught. It was more money than she made in 3 months. "This is a salary adjustment," Kong said. "Effective immediately. Your pay is tripled." Her hands trembled. "Sir, I didn't ask for it." "I know," he interrupted. "That's why you're receiving it." He continued before she could speak. "You will also be under my protection. No one touches you. No one threatens you. If they do, they answer to me." The words should have comforted her. Instead, they sent a chill down her spine. Protection from a man like Kong Min-Jae came with a price, spoken or not. "Why?" Ada asked carefully. Kong's eyes darkened, not with lust, not with pity, but with recognition. "Because people who don't break when they're humiliated are dangerous," he said. "And rare." He stepped back, creating distance again. "You can go," he said. "Be careful who you trust. Power attracts parasites." Ada nodded, clutching the envelope like proof this wasn't a dream. As she turned to leave, Kong spoke once more. "Ada." She stopped. "Tonight wasn't about a dress," he said. "It was about control." She understood more than he knew. Outside, the city lights felt harsher, louder. Ada walked home with her coat pulled tight, unaware that across town, Yura Kang sat in a dark apartment, nails digging into her palm as she replayed the humiliation again and again. And beside her, a man listened quietly. A man who smiled when he heard Ada's name. The waitress hadn't cried, and that, more than the slap, had changed everything. By morning, Manhattan was already chewing on the story. Ada felt it the moment she stepped out of the subway. The way people glanced up from their phones. The way whispers traveled just a little too fast when she passed. By the time she reached Kōng Noir for her evening shift, the headline had changed shape a dozen times. Billionaire throws ex-wife out. Power play at Kōng Noir. Waitress at center of scandal. No one mentioned her name. Not yet. Inside the restaurant, the atmosphere was different, tight, watchful. Staff spoke in low voices. The manager avoided eye contact. Two unfamiliar men in black suits stood near the entrance, scanning faces with practiced precision. Protection, Ada realized. Kong hadn't been exaggerating. She tied her apron, steadying her breath. The envelope from the night before was still tucked safely in her bag at home, untouched. She hadn't told her brother yet. She hadn't told anyone. Money like that came with questions, and questions led to danger. Ada. She turned. The manager cleared his throat. Mr. Kong wants you in the main dining area tonight. Section A. Her pulse spiked. Section A was where power sat, where mistakes weren't forgiven. Yes, sir, she said. The first guests arrived within minutes. Men in tailored suits, women dripping in quiet luxury. They looked at Ada differently now. Not dismissively, not kindly, cautiously. She served with the same calm she always had. But inside, she felt the shift. When a glass tipped, hands rushed to steady it. When a guest raised their voice, another hushed them quickly. Her presence had become noticed, and that made her uneasy. Halfway through the evening, the doors opened again. A hush rippled outward like a wave. Kōng Min-Jae entered without announcement. He wore a charcoal suit tonight, sharp enough to cut. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes moved through the room with quiet command. Conversations softened. Chairs straightened. Ada felt him before she saw him. Her spine went rigid. Kong took his usual seat in the VIP section, but he didn't look at the menu. Instead, his gaze followed Ada as she moved from table to table. Not possessive, assessing. When she approached his table, her hands were steady. Good evening, sir, she said. Good evening, Ada, he replied. The use of her name sent a murmur through the room. He ordered simply. When she turned to leave, he added, sit. Her heart skipped. Yes, sir. After you serve, he clarified calmly. Here. She nodded and finished her round, aware of eyes burning into her back. When she returned, she sat across from him, perching on the edge of the chair like someone ready to flee. You're uncomfortable, Kong observed. I'm aware, Ada replied carefully. That attention can be dangerous. A corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile. Good, he said. Fear keeps people alive. He leaned back slightly. My ex-wife has been making calls, Kong continued. Very loud ones. Ada's chest tightened. I assumed she would. She believes I humiliated her for you. Ada shook her head. I never asked you to. I know, Kong interrupted. That's the point. He studied her face, searching for something. You didn't use the moment, he said. You didn't ask for favors. You didn't run to the press. I don't want that kind of life, Ada said softly. Yet it's circling you anyway, Kong replied. He slid a slim folder across the table. Ada hesitated, then opened it. Inside were documents. Art gallery schedules, charity event invitations, cultural foundation plans. Her brow furrowed. I need someone I can trust, Kong said. Someone who understands people, not politics. Someone who doesn't worship power. Her throat went dry. You want me to? To help me clean parts of my empire, he finished. Legitimate fronts. Cultural investments. Art. Ada closed the folder slowly. That's not my world. It will be, Kong said. If you accept. She met his gaze. And if I don't? Then you remain a waitress, he said evenly. Protected. Paid. But always watched. The honesty unsettled her more than a threat would have. Before she could answer, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. Yura Kang stood just outside the glass doors. Her makeup was flawless. Her smile wasn't. She locked eyes with Ada through the glass. Hatred sharpened into something colder, calculated. Kong didn't turn. She's not allowed inside, Ada said quietly. No, Kong replied. But she wants to be seen. Yura raised her phone, snapping a photo through the glass. The flash went off. Ada's stomach dropped. She's starting a narrative, Ada said. Kong finally stood. Let her, he said. Stories reveal more about the teller than the truth. As he walked away, he paused beside Ada. Decide, he said. But understand this. Once you step closer to me, there is no invisible anymore. Outside, Yura lowered her phone, already dialing a number. Fine, June, she said coldly. It's time. Ada watched from inside, the folder heavy in her hands. The billionaire had chosen the waitress. Now the world was choosing sides, and Ada was standing in the middle of a war that had just found its opening move. Ada didn't sleep that night. The folder Kong had given her lay unopened on the small kitchen table, its neat edges glowing under the weak yellow bulb like a quiet threat. Every time she passed it, her chest tightened. Opportunity had never knocked this loudly before. She made tea she didn't drink, paced the narrow apartment, checked on her brother twice even though he slept peacefully. When dawn finally crept through the blinds, Ada knew one thing for certain. Whatever she chose next would change everything. By evening, she had made her decision. Kōng Noir was closed when she returned. No music, no guests, just silence and the soft echo of her footsteps as security escorted her through the private entrance. The city outside felt far away, muffled, like a life she was already leaving behind. Kong waited in his office. This time, he stood by the desk, sleeves rolled up again, jacket draped over the chair. He looked less like a billionaire and more like a man who carried too many battles in his bones. You came, he said. Yes, Ada replied. He gestured to the chair. She didn't sit. I read everything, she said, lifting the folder. The galleries, the foundations, the charities. And? Kong asked. And I don't trust easy money, Ada said, especially when it comes from powerful men. A pause. Then, unexpectedly, Kong smiled. Not warmly, not cruelly, respectfully. Good, he said. You shouldn't. He walked around the desk, stopping a careful distance from her. I won't lie to you, Kong continued. My world is dangerous. People smile while planning your funeral. If you step into it, you will be watched, tested, threatened. Ada met his gaze. I already am. He studied her for a long moment. Why do you want me? She asked. Kong didn't answer immediately. When I was younger, he said slowly, I believed power came from fear, from making people smaller than you. He turned away, staring into the fire. It took losing everything I loved to understand that fear only creates enemies. Ada's breath caught. Your marriage? Yes, he said simply. And more. Silence settled again. I need someone near me who hasn't been shaped by this world, Kong said. Someone who still knows right from wrong. You think I won't change? Ada asked. I think you'll fight it, he replied. And that matters. He extended his hand, not commanding, not demanding. An offer. You won't be my employee, Kong said. You'll be my liaison, cultural advisor. You'll have authority, protection, and enemies, Ada added. Yes, he agreed. Ada exhaled slowly. My brother comes first, she said. Always. He will be safe, Kong promised. Educated. Protected. She searched his face for deceit and found none, only certainty. I don't want blood on my hands, Ada said. Then don't put it there, Kong replied. I don't need you to be ruthless. I need you to be honest. Her fingers brushed the cross at her chest. I'll try, she said. Kong nodded once. Then we begin carefully. Across the city, Yura Kang watched the same firelight flicker on a different screen. She sat in a darkened penthouse, a glass of untouched wine in her hand, rage simmering beneath her calm exterior. The humiliation still burned. The way Kong had dismissed her. The way the room had chosen silence over her name. And worse, the way he had chosen that girl. Her phone vibrated. Yura Kang's name lit the screen. Talk, Yura said. He's moving assets, June replied. Cultural fronts. Art foundations. Yura smiled slowly. So the waitress is useful now. She's close, June said. Which makes her dangerous. Or disposable, Yura replied. She straightened, eyes hard. I want Kong destroyed, she said. But I want her to fall first. June chuckled. Then we use her. Back at Kōng Noir, Kong handed Ada a slim phone. Encrypted, he said. Only 2 numbers matter. She took it. Mine, he continued. And security. He hesitated, then added. Trust is expensive. Spend it wisely. As Ada left the office, she felt the weight of what she'd agreed to settle into her bones. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was standing beside the devil. And somewhere in the shadows, someone was already sharpening the knife meant for her back. Yura Kang did not scream. She did not throw things or collapse into tears the way tabloids imagined fallen women did. Rage, for Yura, was a quiet thing, cold, deliberate, sharpened by patience. The penthouse lights were low, the city glittering below like something she had once owned. She stood at the window long after June ended the call, replaying every second of that night at Kōng Noir. The slap, the silence, Kong's back as he walked away from her. And the girl, a black waitress with nothing to her name but dignity. And now, somehow, Kong Min-Jae's attention. Yura's fingers tightened around the stem of her wine glass. He chose her, she murmured. After everything. She turned from the window and crossed the room, heels clicking softly against marble. On the wall hung framed photographs, galas, charity events, power dinners. Her beside Kong, smiling, admired, untouchable. She took one down. The glass shattered when it hit the floor. Yura Kang arrived an hour later. He moved like a man who knew how to enter rooms without being announced. Kong's cousin looked nothing like him. Lighter smile, softer voice. But beneath it lived the same blood, the same hunger. You're sure? June asked, settling into a chair across from her. Yura poured herself another glass. This time, she drank. He's positioning her, she said. Cultural fronts. Art. Foundations. He's cleaning his empire. June nodded. Which means he's vulnerable. Yura's lips curved slowly. No. It means she is. June leaned forward. Explain. She's close enough to touch him, Yura said. But not powerful enough to survive the fallout. June's eyes gleamed with understanding. A fall person, he said. Exactly, Yura replied. If Kong goes down, she goes with him. If he survives, she becomes the stain he can't erase. June chuckled softly. You always did understand leverage. Yura's gaze hardened. I want everything taken from him. His reputation, his allies, his future. And the girl? June asked. Yura didn't hesitate. Break her first. Across the city, Ada felt the shift before she understood it. It started small. A missed call that left no voicemail. A stranger lingering too long outside her apartment building. A coworker who suddenly stopped speaking when she entered the room. Power had wrapped itself around her life like silk, and beneath it, something sharp waited. At Kōng Noir, Kong moved her carefully into her new role. Meetings replaced shifts. Galleries replaced dining rooms. Ada learned to listen more than she spoke, to read the spaces between words. She was good at it. Too good. You have instincts, Kong told her one evening as they reviewed foundation proposals. You see what others miss. Ada smiled faintly. I've spent my life watching rooms I wasn't meant to belong in. That answer stayed with him. What Ada didn't know was that every step she took was being mirrored somewhere else. Documents were copied. Signatures were forged. Accounts were quietly linked. And always, her name appeared near the edges. The trap began with art. June arranged a private acquisition, rare, controversial, expensive. the kind of piece that attracted attention from collectors and authorities. The paperwork was immaculate. Too immaculate. Ada noticed the inconsistency late one night, alone in Kong's office. A shipping date that didn't match. A gallery stamp that felt wrong. Her stomach tightened. She reached for the encrypted phone Kong had given her, then stopped. Don't panic, she told herself. Verify first. That hesitation would cost her. Because across town, Yura Kang smiled as she watched the final document slide into place. Now, Yura said softly, we wait. The next morning, Ada woke to a message that made her blood run cold. Unknown number. You don't belong in his world. Walk away while you can. Her hands shook. For the first time since the slap, fear crept into her bones. Not loud, not dramatic, but heavy. She looked at her brother sleeping peacefully in the next room, and understood the truth too late. This was no longer about survival. It was about war, and she had just been marked as the opening sacrifice. For the first time in months, Ada slept through the night. The envelope Kong had given her contained more cash than she'd seen in her life. Enough to clear the hospital bills with money left over. Enough to buy her brother the medication he needed, the kind that actually worked instead of the cheap generics that barely kept him stable. Enough to stop the collection agencies from calling, stop the landlord from slipping eviction notices under her door. She'd counted it 3 times, disbelieving. Then she'd hidden it in 6 different places around her tiny apartment before finally gathering it all together and stuffing it in her purse. The next morning, she'd gone to the hospital billing office and watched the clerk's expression shift from bored indifference to wide-eyed attention as Ada laid stack after stack of bills on the counter. Paid in full, the clerk had said, stamping the receipt with unnecessary force. Marcus had cried when she told him. Not sad tears, relief. Pure, exhausting relief. His face had more color than she'd seen in weeks. The new medication was already working. His hands didn't shake as much when he reached for her. How did you? He'd started to ask. I got a promotion, she'd lied. Better tips. Night shift pays more. He believed her because he needed to. Because the alternative was too terrible to consider. Everything should have felt better. Everything should have felt lighter. Instead, Ada felt like she was drowning. It started small, a feeling more than anything concrete. The prickle between her shoulder blades when she crossed the casino floor. The sense that eyes followed her even when she turned and saw no one looking directly at her. She told herself she was paranoid. That the weight of what she'd done, spying on guests, feeding information to a criminal, was manifesting as guilt-induced anxiety. But then she noticed Marcus. The head of security stood near the private gaming rooms more often than usual. Not obviously watching her, but present. Always present. And when their eyes met across the casino floor, he didn't look away quickly like someone caught staring. He held her gaze for a long, measured moment before returning to his tablet. The other servers whispered. Ada caught fragments of conversation that died the moment she approached. Lily, who usually chatted endlessly about her boyfriend's latest drama, went quiet when Ada entered the break room. Chun, the bartender who'd worked at the Diamond Pearl for 15 years, stopped mid-sentence during a story when Ada walked past. Am I being paranoid? She asked May during a rare quiet moment at the bar. May glanced around before leaning closer. You should be careful. What does that mean? It means people are asking questions about you. May's voice dropped to barely a whisper. About why you suddenly have money. About who you've been talking to. Ada's stomach clenched. I got a promotion. I know what you told everyone. May's expression was sympathetic but firm. I'm just saying. Be careful. That night, Ada left work an hour after her shift ended, taking the long way to the employee exit. She told herself she was being ridiculous, that she was imagining things. But she wasn't imagining the 2 men in dark suits standing near the service elevators, speaking in low voices. She wasn't imagining the way they glanced at their phones, then looked up at her, then back at their phones like they were comparing her face to a photograph. She took the stairs instead. On the 3rd floor landing, She heard voices echoing up from below. Male voices speaking English with clipped, professional accents. She froze, one hand on the railing. Confirmed her identity. The waitress, Ada Chun. Her blood turned to ice. And the documents are ready? A different voice, deeper. All prepared. False financial records, fabricated communications. When we move on Kong, everything will point back to her as the informant. Interpol scheduled for Thursday. 2 days. She won't see it coming. Kong certainly won't. He'll think she was working against him the whole time. Footsteps ascending. Ada ran up the stairs as quietly as she could, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She burst through the 4th-floor door and kept running until she reached the parking garage, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Her hands shook as she fumbled for her car keys. They were setting her up, using her. She'd thought she was trading information for money, thought she understood the transaction. But she was never the informant. She was the patsy, the fall guy. When Interpol raided Kong's operation, they'd find a trail leading straight back to her. Fabricated evidence of her betrayal. Kong would think she'd sold him out. His organization would come for her, and she'd have no way to prove her innocence because the real informant would disappear, untouchable, while she took the fall for everything. Marcus's face flashed through her mind. Her brother, finally getting better, finally stable. If she ran, she'd be abandoning him. She had some money left, but not enough to disappear properly. Not enough to take him with her. If she stayed, they'd destroy her anyway. Unless. Ada sat in her car in the dim parking garage, engine running, hands gripping the steering wheel. Unless she warned Kong, the man who terrified her, the criminal who dragged her into this nightmare, the one person who might actually believe her, who might protect her because he'd need to know who really betrayed him. 2 days until the raid. One impossible choice. Run and save herself, abandon Marcus to whatever came after. Or walk back into the lion's den and pray that honesty would buy her what money never could. Survival. Ada didn't go home that night. She sat in her car until the parking garage lights dimmed to emergency mode, until the late shift workers trickled out to their vehicles, until silence pressed against the windows like something physical. Her phone buzzed repeatedly. Marcus, probably. Worried. She couldn't answer. Couldn't explain what she was about to do because she barely understood it herself. At 3 a.m., she drove to an all-night diner and ordered coffee she didn't drink. She wrote everything down on napkins. Every conversation she'd had with the man in the gray suit. Every question he'd asked. Every detail she'd reported. The envelope of cash. The voices in the stairwell. The fabricated documents. The Interpol raid scheduled for Thursday. 2 days. The napkins covered the table like evidence at a crime scene. At dawn, she drove back to the Diamond Pearl. The casino never truly slept, but the early morning held a different quality. Desperate gamblers nursing losses. Cleaning crews vacuuming around occupied slot machines. The fluorescent unreality of a place designed to erase time. Ada's employee badge still worked. She moved through the service corridors with her heart in her throat, expecting security to stop her at any moment. But the cameras watched in silence. The hallways remained empty. She'd made it to the executive elevator when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. Miss Chun. The voice was smooth, familiar. The man in the gray suit. You're at the casino. Interesting choice. Ada's breath caught. How did you? We've been monitoring you, of course. For your protection. A pause waited with meaning. You should go home, Ada. This doesn't concern you anymore. You're setting me up. We're completing an operation. There's a difference. His tone shifted, became almost gentle. You served your purpose. The evidence is already in place. In 48 hours, Kong's organization collapses and Interpol closes the file. You walk away with money in your pocket and a brother who gets to keep his medications. Everyone wins. Except me when Kong finds out. Kong will be in custody. His associates will scatter. By the time anyone thinks to look for you, you'll be irrelevant. The man paused. But if you warn him, everything changes. You become an active participant in organized crime. An accomplice. We'd have no choice but to include you in the charges. The threat was clear. Stay quiet and survive. Speak up and go down with Kōng. Go home, Ada, the man said softly. This was always bigger than you. The line went dead. Ada stood in the empty corridor, phone pressed to her ear, listening to silence. Every rational instinct screamed at her to run. To take Marcus and disappear before the walls closed in. To save herself while she still could. She pressed the button for the executive floor. The elevator rose in silence. Somewhere above her, Kōng was conducting business as usual, unaware that evidence was being planted throughout his operation like landmines. Financial records that would show money laundering. Communications that would prove criminal conspiracy. All of it pointing to Ada Chun, minimum wage waitress, as his inside informant. The real informant was already Ghost. Yura, if that was even his real name, had played them both perfectly. Kōng would fall, the investigation would close, and Yura would vanish into whatever agency or organization had sent him. Clean. Professional. Devastating. The elevator slowed. Ada's reflection stared back at her from the polished doors. She looked different. Harder. The frightened woman who'd spilled wine seemed like someone from another lifetime. Someone who'd believed the world operated on simple rules. Work hard. Keep your head down. Survive. That woman had died the moment the slap echoed across the gaming floor. The elevator chimed. The doors opened onto a hallway carpeted in deep burgundy. At the far end, a heavy wooden door. Kong's office. 2 guards stood outside, hands resting casually near concealed weapons. They recognized her. Their postures shifted, became alert but not threatening. After all, she was Kong's little project. His pet informant. They had no idea. Ada walked forward on legs that threatened to buckle. Each step felt like crossing a frozen lake, ice cracking beneath her feet. Behind that door was a man who terrified her. A criminal who'd pulled her into darkness without hesitation. A predator who saw people as tools to be used and discarded. But he was also the only person who might believe her. The only person with the power to stop what was coming. The guard stepped aside. Ada's hand reached for the door handle. She thought of Marcus. Of the hospital bills that would pile up again if she ended up in prison. Of the mother who died working 3 jobs. Of every choice that had led to this moment. The slap was never about wine. It was the first move in a war. And Ada Chun, waitress turned informant turned patsy, was standing at ground zero with evidence that could save Kōng or destroy them both. She turned the handle. The door opened. Kōng looked up from his desk, his expression shifting from mild irritation to something far more dangerous as he recognized her. Miss Chun, he said quietly. It's rather early for a social call. Ada stepped inside, letting the door close behind her with a soft, final click. We need to talk, she said. Someone's coming for you, and they want you to think it's me.